Stella by Starlight, Chapter 23, A True Story. Scattered rain followed them all the way home, but even though she was damp and her backside was a little sore from sitting on the wagon seat, Stella was in a good mood. At supper, she chattered on to Jojo and Mama all about the trip. Papa remained quiet and thoughtful. After helping her mother clear the kitchen, Stella hurried to find her notebook. For the very first time, she wanted to write something, and it wasn't an assignment. It wasn't required. She just wanted to remember what Papa had told her. The man who wanted to be a soldier. A true story. Today I rode into town with Papa, and he told me a story I'd never heard before. When Papa got old enough, he wanted to, decided to join the army. It was 1914. There was a war. Young Jonah wanted to serve his country and go fight the enemy, whoever that was. The local folks all made a big deal about wanting boys from around here to sign up. Somebody said newspaper reporters with cameras would be at the recruiting office to snap a picture of the first boy, young man from our area to sign up to be a soldier, enlist. So my daddy, who had just turned 18 years old, got up early, before daylight, and walked all the way to Spindale, to town. He was the very first in line. Lots of, 22 young men showed up that day, but Papa got there first. When the reporters saw that a colored boy stood first in line, they pushed him out of the way and said he was in the wrong line and told him to go home. The newspaper people snapped their bright camera bulbs and took lots of, dozens of pictures of Jimmy Winkleman, a white boy instead. He'd stood second in line behind Papa. They would not let Papa be in the army. So he walked back home. So very sad. It's strange to imagine my father being so young, and hard to think about him being so sad. Jimmy Winkleman, Papa told me, died in the war. Chapter 24, Empty Blue-Lined Paper. Stella had stayed up far too late writing. It had taken her a couple of hours, and still it wasn't right. Plus, she kind of missed the thrill of sneaking out to her porch step. At least she got the story down. So the next morning, she trudged down the road, yawning, but forgot her fatigue when she reached her friends, telling them about the trip to Spindale, the test the adults had to take, and how they'd all been treated. It made me feel good to see somebody finally stand up against a man like that, she finished up. Well, actually, we sat down, but it worked. At school, once attendance had been taken, Mrs. Grayson began the usual morning routine. Please rise, she commanded. Hands on hearts, face the flag, children. Stella, with the rest of her class, chanted loudly and clearly. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. She always liked the rhythm of the words of the pledge and made her feel like she belonged to something important. After the morning prayer, Mrs. Grayson told them to be seated as she had an announcement. She held up the front page of the Carolina Times. I found something in here yesterday that I think will be both useful and enjoyable. I'm especially pleased to say this opportunity comes from the newspaper that represents Negro people all over the state. Her voice was edged with excitement. They're offering a contest for all ages, including school children. What kind of contest? Tony asked. Sports? Not this time, Anthony, Mrs. Grayson replied. The planners of the competition are looking for art and poetry and writing. Tony thunked his head down on his desk. Stella groaned. More writing? I do believe, however, that the newspaper sponsors an athletic contest in the spring, Anthony. We'll be sure to participate in that one as well, Mrs. Grayson promised. Now sit up straight. Helen Spencer raised her hand. When Mrs. Grayson acknowledged her, she asked, If we do the writing one, how long does it have to be? Looking down at the information in front of her, Mrs. Grayson replied, The entries may be drawings or stories or essays no longer than 3 handwritten pages, and the best pieces will be published in the paper. Do we have to enter the contest? Randy asked. I like bugs and science better. Scientists must be good writers as well, Mrs. Grayson informed him. I knew she'd say that, Carolyn whispered to Stella. The teacher went on. Each of you will prepare a piece of writing or art for the contest. I will choose the best from each of the age categories and submit those 3 to represent Riverside School. What will they be judged on? Carolyn asked. Creativity, clarity, cleverness, and penmanship. Poor handwriting can destroy your chances to win, Mrs. Grayson replied, looking stern. Since I can't do a sport in the competition, do you think it's all right if I write about sports? Tony asked. I'm sure that will be acceptable, Mrs. Grayson told him. So let's get busy, children. I expect our Riverside School to be wonderfully represented in this contest. We will spend from now until lunch working on ideas and rough drafts. Little ones, grades 1, 2, 3. I will work with you first. Get your pencils out and ready to draw your very best pictures. Older students, I want you to organize your thoughts. Take notes and decide what you will write. The room buzzed with activity for the next hour or so. Stella, however, sat slumped in her seat. Everybody else was scribbling away on their papers. Stella stared at her empty blue-lined sheet, disheartened. She couldn't think of a thing to write about, or anything that anybody else would even want to read. All that practicing in the middle of the night didn't do me a lick of good. Hazel leaned over into the aisle and called out, Stella, how do you draw a picture of a hole? Stella was happy for an excuse to close her notebook. A hole? Yeah, you know, like a hidey place hole with snakes. Snakes? Yep. I'm not sure, Stella told her, thinking what a strange thing that was for the first grader to draw for the contest. I reckon it would be round and dark, right? Why do you want to draw a hole? Hazel looked at her as if that was the silliest question in the world. I've got 12 brothers and sisters, she explained patiently. When you live in my house, you've got to have a hidey hole. That's what my story is about. So how do you draw it? Stella did the best she could, but she really had no idea how to create the picture that Hazel wanted. When school let out, Hazel thanked Stella and said she'd be able to finish it all by herself the next day. On the way home, Stella was in no mood to joke or play around with her friends like she usually did. Most of the boys had stayed late to pitch horseshoes in the schoolyard, but Tony joined her. Jojo trailed not far behind, picking up rocks and pitching them at tree trunks. It was a perfect October afternoon with the sun streaming through what remained of the russet leaves of the maple and beech trees that lined the road. But Stella focused on kicking up clouds from the reddish dirt at her feet instead. She hadn't written a thing for the contest, not one single word. What's got you all cattywampus? Tony asked her. I'm just missing the summer, Stella replied with a shrug. Everything gets crunchy and fades away in the fall and winter. Me, I like the fall, Tony proclaimed, pretending the tree branch he had swept up from the side of the road was a sword. And I like the way you say stuff, he said. You're not ordinary, and not crunchy, he added. Stella smiled at him hesitantly. Thanks, I guess, she said, wondering what being not crunchy meant. I was just thinking about the writing contest and what I can enter. She hoped she didn't sound stupid. Words fall out of the sky like leaves, girl. Grab a couple and write 'em down. You make it sound so easy, she said, catching an apricot-colored leaf in midair as Tony whacked the mottled white trunk of a birch tree. Quit trying so hard. Just write what you see, what you think. That's all I do. He scooped up an armful of leaves and showered them over her head. Quit it, she said, brushing dust and specks from her hair, laughing. You'll think of something, he said easily, brandishing his stick at an invisible enemy. But me, I think instead of writing about baseball or football, I'm going to write about a knight who slays a fire-breathing dragon. He beheaded the dried blooms of a hydrangea bush. Sounds like a great idea, Stella told him, steering clear of his pretense at knighthood. You could write about dragons, too, Tony said. Now, knighting a small boxwood bush? I'm lousy at writing make-believe stories. Tony tossed the stick aside, wiped his hands on his pants, and faced Stella directly. So write a true story, he challenged. Write about what you saw by the pond. Oh, I couldn't. Stella declared. "It's too dangerous." "Why the heck not? And by the way, did you know the head of the clan is called a Grand Dragon?" "He is?" Her palms instantly grew sweaty. "So write your own dragon story. I dare you." With that, he turned on his heel and ran ahead. Stella kicked up red dust the whole rest of the way home, wondering if she dared. Chapter 25, Dragons. Stella sat on her back steps. Though the sun was going down over the pond, it wasn't dark yet, so no one could scold her. Should she dare? Should she dare write about the clan? Sometimes people had to be ready for the truth, she decided. She pressed her notebook open flat. Maybe just whispering about the truth at first would be a better idea. She'd be, what did Mrs. Grayson call it? Subtle. She'd be subtle, but she'd do it for the contest. 3 drafts later, most of the scratch-outs and erasures eliminated, she finally put her pencil back in the box. Slaying dragons. Dragons are not real. In storybooks, they are usually blood red with shiny scales and sharp teeth. They have long necks and tails that swing hard enough to knock down any soldier. And wings. Dragons in books can fly. Dragons are always fierce. Brave warriors dressed in thick armor go out with shiny swords to slay them. In those stories, dragons are never killed. They are always slain instead. Not sure why. Dragons in fables breathe fire from their mouths. They burn trees and bushes and farmhouses. Castles are harder to burn, I guess, but dragon flames make a really good picture in a storybook. Knights in armor were real, but dragons completely made up. I think the Ku Klux Klan chose the dragon as their symbol because it's scary. The people around here who dress up in bed sheets and call themselves dragons are very real. But didn't all the dragons from the fairy tales get slain?